Tracy sat quietly in her kitchen, sipping her morning coffee and listening to the faint creaks and groans of her home. It was a quiet Sunday in rural South Carolina, and she felt a sense of peace, something she hadn't experienced in months. Her 5 children were playing outside, laughing and chasing each other around the yard. Life seemed normal, but something felt off. It all started a few days earlier when Tracy heard strange noises coming from her attic. At first, she dismissed it as a house settling, but the sounds persisted, creaking footsteps, faint whispers, and occasional thuds. One night, her youngest son, Jake, woke up screaming, convinced he'd seen someone moving in the hallway. Tracy reassured him, but the fear lingered in her mind. The next morning, she decided to investigate. Her sons, Alex and Ben, along with her nephew, James, joined her. Armed with flashlights and a broom, they climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew filled their nostrils. As they searched, they noticed protruding nails and scratches on the wooden beams. James spotted something unusual, a faint outline of a person in the heating unit. He called out, his voice trembling, "Mom, look!" Tracy rushed over, her heart racing. Peering inside, she saw him, a man, sleeping soundly, completely oblivious to their presence. Before they could react, the man stirred, startled by the light. He bolted upright, wide-eyed and disoriented. Without a word, he bolted out of the attic and disappeared into the woods behind the house. Trace's sons chased after him, but he vanished into the dense underbrush, leaving them breathless and confused. When the police arrived, they found no sign of the intruder. But further inspection of the attic revealed disturbing details. The ceiling vents had been carefully altered, allowing him to peer into Trace's bedroom and living areas. Empty cups filled with waste were hidden in inconspicuous places, evidence of his prolonged stay. Tracy was shaken. How could someone have been living in her home for 2 weeks without her noticing? And who was this man? She remembered him vividly, a man she had dated 12 years ago. His name was David, and their relationship had ended bitterly. They had lost touch over the years, but now, it seemed, he had resurfaced. David had been living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. Desperate for a place to stay, he had resorted to extreme measures. Knowing Tracy lived nearby, he had devised a plan to hide in plain sight, hoping to reconnect with her. But his plan had backfired, and now he was on the run. Tracy couldn't shake the feeling that David was still out there, watching her every move. The police warned her to be cautious, but she knew she couldn't live in constant fear. She needed answers. As she sat in her living room, scrolling through old photos on her phone, she came across one of herself and David from years ago. He looked different now, older, thinner, and more rugged, but there was something familiar about his eyes. That night, Tracy couldn't sleep. She kept hearing whispers in the darkness, echoes of the noises she had heard in the attic. Finally, she got out of bed and went to the window. To her horror, she saw a shadowy figure standing in her backyard, staring up at her house. Her scream woke the entire neighborhood. Neighbors rushed over, armed with flashlights and cell phones. But the figure was gone, vanished into the night like a ghost. The next morning, Tracy called the police again. This time, she insisted they take her seriously. "He's still out there," she told them. "He's watching me." Detectives arrived, taking statements and examining the backyard. They found no physical evidence, but they agreed to increase patrols in the area. Still, Tracy couldn't shake the feeling that David was closer than ever. As she drove to work the next day, she noticed a car parked across the street from her house. It wasn't there the day before. Her heart raced as she recognized the driver, a man who looked strikingly similar to David. She tried to calm herself, telling herself it was probably a coincidence. But the longer she stayed, the more convinced she became that it was him. She pulled into the driveway and grabbed her phone, dialing 911. "Here's he," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please hurry." The dispatcher promised to send officers immediately, but Tracy knew she couldn't wait. She locked herself in her car and called her oldest son, Alex. "Stay on the line with me," she said, her hand shaking. "Don't hang up." Minutes passed like hours. Tracy's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if David had tracked her down? What if he was planning something worse? Then, she heard a knock on her car window. Tracy froze when she heard the knock on her car window. Her heart pounded in her chest as she peered out, her breath catching in her throat. Standing outside was a man she hadn't seen in 12 years, her ex-boyfriend, David. His face was gaunt, his clothes disheveled, and his eyes wild with desperation. "Tracy," he said softly, his voice hoarse. "Let me explain." "No," she whispered, clutching her phone tightly. "Get away from me." "Please, just hear me out," David pleaded, pressing his hand against the glass. "I didn't mean for things to turn out like this. I just wanted to see you." Trace's hands trembled as she dialed 911 again. "Help me," she said into the phone, her voice barely audible. "He's outside my car." David backed away slightly, holding up his hands in surrender. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I just need to talk." Tracy hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. She had so many questions. How had he found her? Why had he hidden in her attic? And most importantly, what did he want now? But her instinct screamed at her to stay safe. "Stay where you are," she said firmly, keeping the phone pressed to her ear. "The police are on their way." David nodded slowly, his expression pained. "Okay," he said. "I'll wait." Just then, headlights flashed in the distance. A police cruiser rounded the corner, its siren wailing. David stepped back, his face contorting with anger. "You called them," he shouted. "Why?" Tracy didn't respond. She lowered her phone slightly, her eyes fixed on David. The cruiser pulled up beside her car, its spotlight illuminating the scene. 2 officers stepped out, guns drawn. "Freeze!" One of them barked, aiming his weapon at David. David raised his hands, his gaze shifting between Tracy and the officers. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice cracking. "I just need to talk to her." The officers approached cautiously, their eyes scanning the area. "Step away from the car," one commanded. David hesitated, glancing at Tracy one last time. "Please," he mouthed silently, tears welling in his eyes. Then, without another word, he turned and ran into the darkness. Tracy watched in horror as David disappeared into the woods. The officers pursued him, shouting commands, but he was fast, slipping between trees and vanishing into the night. When they returned, empty-handed, Tracy collapsed into her seat, sobbing. The officers assured her they would find him, but Tracy knew better. David was slippery, and he had proven time and again that he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. That night, Tracy lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in her mind like a broken record. She couldn't shake the feeling that David was still out there, watching her every move. The next morning, she decided to confront her past head-on. She drove to the address where she and David had lived 12 years ago, hoping to find clues about his current whereabouts. The house was abandoned now, its windows boarded up and its yard overgrown. But as she walked around the property, she noticed something odd, a pile of rocks near the foundation, arranged in a peculiar pattern. Curious, she knelt down and examined them. Beneath the rocks, she found a small notebook. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages, her heart sinking with each entry. It was David's handwriting notes about his struggles, his obsession with her, and his plans to win her back. One entry stood out. "She'll remember me. She has too." Trace's blood ran cold. David wasn't just desperate, he was obsessed. And if he had been hiding in her attic for 2 weeks, he must have been watching her every move. As she stood up, she noticed movement in the bushes nearby. Her heart leapt into her throat as she saw David emerge from the shadows, his face pale and his eyes wild. "Tracy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've been looking for you everywhere." Tracy froze, her heart pounding as David stepped closer. The notebook fell from her hands, forgotten in the grass. Her mind raced with options, but there was nowhere to run. The abandoned house was surrounded by dense woods, and calling for help would alert David to her vulnerability. "David," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We need to talk, but not here. Let's go somewhere safe." David hesitated, his gaze flickering between her and the notebook on the ground. For a moment, she thought he might agree, but then his expression hardened. "No," he said, his voice low and menacing. "This is where it ends." Trace's instincts kicked in. She lunged for the notebook, hoping to distract him, but David was faster. He grabbed her wrist, his grip tight and painful. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't take you right here," he growled, his face inches from hers. Tracy's mind raced. She had to think fast. "Because if you do, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison," she said, her voice firm. "Do you really want that?" David faltered, his grip loosening slightly. "I don't care about prison," he spat. "All I care about is you." "Then let me go," Tracy said, her voice trembling but resolute. "You don't have to do this." David stared at her for a long moment, his breathing ragged. Then, slowly, he released her wrist. "Fine," he said, stepping back. "But you're coming with me." Tracy didn't hesitate. She turned and sprinted toward the edge of the woods, her heart pounding. David shouted after her, his footsteps crashing through the underbrush. She dodged branches and leapt over roots, her legs burning with exertion. Finally, she broke free of the trees and stumbled onto a dirt road. A car was parked nearby, its engine running. Relief flooded through her as she recognized it as her own. She fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped them. Just as she slid into the driver's seat, David burst out of the woods. He skidded to a stop, his face contorted with rage. "Tracy!" he shouted, pounding on the windshield. Tracy gunned the engine, tires spinning in the date. She hit the gas hard, sending gravel flying as she sped away. David chased after her, but she was already too far ahead. Later that evening, Tracy sat in her living room, her family gathered around her. The police had arrived just in time, responding to her frantic call from the road. David had been arrested and taken into custody. The ordeal had left Tracy shaken, but she knew she was safe now. The police assured her they would keep a close eye on her, and she had installed additional security measures in her home. As she hugged her children tightly, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The nightmare was finally over. David's obsession had cost him dearly, and she was determined never to let him near her or her family again. The scars of the past would take time to heal, but Tracy was stronger than ever. She had faced her fears and emerged victorious. And though the memory of those terrifying weeks would linger, she knew she had the support of her loved ones to help her move forward. Subscribe to our channel for more scintillating true crime stories.